Numerous pain studies that also have caught my attention. Dental studies where people were given a placebo and were told that they were given a very strong narcotic for pain. And almost 50% of the people that were given the placebo had absolutely no pain during the procedure. Now what they did was they found a substance that would block morphine receptors. And what they found is when they injected this substance, all of the person's pain came back, which means then that person was making their own pharmacy of morphine, their own pharmacy of anti-pain chemicals by thought alone. There's a Parkinson's study that I found very fascinating. Parkinson's disease is a deficiency in dopamine in the brain. And when there's not enough dopamine in the brain, the upper motor neurons can't communicate well with each other, and it causes involuntary tremors or spastic paralysis in the body. So in the placebo study, they told the subjects that the placebo was a very strong drug that would heal Parkinson's disease and their symptoms. When they got the substance administered to them, more than 50% of the people with the Parkinson's disease, all of their symptoms went away. And one researcher said, well, if they no longer have any tremors, is it possible then that their body's making their own pharmacy of dopamine? So now, they did this little study where they injected a radioactive dye into their bloodstream that competes for the receptor sites for dopamine. Now think about receptor sites in your brain like parking spaces. So if the person that was given the placebo was making their own dopamine, dopamine would get into the parking spaces first, and when they injected this radioactive dye, there would be no parking spaces for the dye. So when they imaged the brain, they wouldn't see any radioactive elements in any of the areas where dopamine is absorbed. And if they didn't make their own dopamine and they injected the radioactive dye, then dopamine would not be in the parking spaces and the radioactive dye would get into the parking spaces, and we would know then that they were not making their own dopamine. What they found was that these people were making 200 times the amount of dopamine by thought alone. Now there's a caveat to this story, because when those people returned back into their lives and they sat in the same chair, they played chess with their friends, they saw the same people, they went to the same places, they did the same things, all of their conditions returned. In other words, when they returned back to their life, it was their external environment that was controlling the way they were feeling and the way they were thinking. In a sense, they went back to the old self.